Hi, my name is Lisa Del Fuente, and I'm running to be university-wide representative on 3 points. First is increasing voting accessibility on campus, and that means increasing the number of voting polls and booths on campus. Last semester, right before the November elections, I testified at the County Commissioner's Court to ensure that there was a minimum of 15 booths in the FAC, and with help of with other members of student government, this was done successfully. My second initiative is making Plan B free for students on campus, especially survivors of sexual assault, because that is, as it is right now, students have to pay either $50 out of pocket or go through a long, arduous process with UHS to get that Plan B, prescription, insurance. It's very complicated, and considering you only have 72 hours to take that pill, that's not feasible. My third point is making the student minimum wage $15 to reflect the current Austin market and give students a livable wage. And through being a university-wide representative, I can initiate this change on campus. And with that, I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Can we get Matthew next?
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Abraham, and my primary goal as university-wide representative is to listen. I think that as university-wide representative, it's very important that we serve as an outlet for students to voice their concerns and their ideas. One idea that I have is to change UT's environment from a competitive one to a more collaborative one. I want to strengthen and develop peer mentor and resource groups so that students can help other students achieve internships, job opportunities, and research. UT should be a place of growth and support. So in order to do that, we should all listen together, challenge ideas together, come up with new ideas together so that we can all, as a community, grow together. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Can I get Esmeralda?
Hello, my name is Esme Aguilar, and I'm running for U-Wide Rep. I'm running to increase 3 core values on campus: accountability, integrity, and transparency. I believe in the importance of assessing these values on yourself as well as collective group leaders, especially integrity. How characters who you are in the dark, but if you can't be true to yourself, how can you be true to others? However, I understand that UT does a good job of making you feel like an outsider. I get it as a first-gen and transfer student. However, I will strive to create a welcoming space to learn in, within, and outside the classroom. Currently, I'm interning with the City of Austin, and through this nearly year-long community engagement role, I have learned the importance of branching out and meeting people where they are. If you want people to engage, you have to meet them where you are, and I'd be more than happy to meet you where you are with compassion and an open mind. Different doesn't mean wrong, and diversity is our strength. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, can I get Kennedy?
Hi, my name's Kennedy Bailey. I'm a second-year government and race, indigeneity, and migration major, and I'm super excited to be running for university-wide representative. This past year, serving as a liberal arts representative, I've learned a lot. I learned that an initiative-based platform is far more successful than an idealistic one. So I'm running on an initiative-based platform of achievable ideas. My first initiative is to reform CMHC to be more accessible to students experiencing non-emergency mental health crisis, and to be more accessible to students who feel intimidated by the CMHC guidelines. Second, I'm running on affordability. I'd like to bring scholarships from local businesses to students. I used a similar platform in high school, and I won $12,000 worth of scholarships through that way. I think that's a really easy way to approach affordability as student government. Finally, I'd like to bring student government to students. So I hope to win your vote. It's Kennedy Bailey for U-Wide Representative. Thank you.
Thanks, Kennedy, and thank you to all the U-Wide reps that showed up to share their platform with us. Now I'd like to welcome the Executive Alliances to the stage. All of you can come up. So you will each have 2 minutes to introduce your alliance and present your platforms. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So we'll be proceeding in filing order, which means we're going to start with Diego and Brian, and we're going to end with Helen and William. And you guys have 2 minutes each, which means that you guys, both of you can talk, just one person can talk, or you guys can split it up however you want. The same will go for our debate portion of the time. Is everyone ready? Any questions? Awesome. Diego and Brian, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. We are Diego and Brian, and we are running to be your next president and vice president. The reason that we are running is because we were called upon by fellow Longhorns to run. We believe that we have the best vision of UT for the future, but not only that, we know that all the other executive alliances also have great visions for UT. We believe that we are the only executive alliance with the experience to execute this vision over here at UT. We have plans for what we are going to do on the 40 acres, but we also believe that it's necessary to look beyond the 40 acres in order to successfully implement a nice vision for UT.
And for us, the biggest thing is for a vast majority of students, they do not relate to student government. They might not even know it exists, or sometimes they feel it even perpetuates harm. And frankly, I don't blame them. You know, the fact is student government has consistently missed an opportunity to utilize things outside of the 40 acres to bring about genuine, tangible change for all of UT Austin. Stuff when it comes to housing and the affordability of housing. Stuff when it comes to equitable transportation, when it comes to voter registration and civic engagement, when it comes to working with outside organizations like labor groups, the AFL-CIO, and Texas State Workers Union to advocate for student workers once and for all in a formal process. This is something we can do tangibly within our time in office, and we think that we've spent the last year as representatives in the student government. We are both reps, liberal arts representatives. We have cultivated the relationships with countless elected officials that will allow us to bring about these really tangible policies that really will bring in a lot of students back to student government and recognize the fact that we can do so much more. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. George and Anna, go ahead.
Hey, y'all. My name is George Bose, and I'm running to be your next student body president of this great university. You know, when Anna and I decided that we would embark on this journey, we did so not only with a love for this university, but with a love for the general student body. And that's why we're running to enact positive, tangible, visible, and possible change. And it's going to be change that can be seen in the everyday life of every single student at this university. You know, there are entire subsets of the student population that are being left out of the dialogue outside of the room, not being included in the conversations where decisions are being made for you and on behalf of you, and we are going to change that. We would also like to acknowledge the fact that this university as an institution has caused a lot of pain to the people that we hope to represent after this election. And I would also like to acknowledge and highlight the fact that Anna and I are the only executive alliance on this stage where neither of us have a direct correlation to the legislative branch of student government, a branch that has become increasingly more performative as time has gone on. And that's why we believe that the time is now to choose leadership outside of that general space. Thank you.
Hey y'all, my name is Ana Fuentes, and when George and I decided that we would run together, we were inspired by the different and completely unique experiences that each of us have had within this university, and it has inspired our 7 policy platform in which we are running, which includes access to mental health, addressing food insecurity, and also increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion, advocating for reproductive justice, advocating for student workers, and sorry about that, and so on and so forth. And so, again, we are running to give students something to believe in, and that is the central message of our campaign.
Thanks, guys. Can we hear from Harsh and Marlena now?
Hello? Okay. 1 second. Hey guys, my name's Harsh, and I'm running to be your next student body president.
Hello, my name is Marlena. I'm running to be your next VP.
Yeah, so honestly, I want to start this off by giving what feels like a pretty shocking fact to me, which is at UT, families in the lowest income bracket, earning between $0 to $30,000 a year, have to pay an average of $12,000 just to send their kids to college. That's shocking. Like, these are families that can barely put food on the table, and at best they're having to fork over 1/3 of their income just so their child can get an education, right? And at worst, they're not going to be able to afford that. This is a real financial crisis that UT students are facing, and it's not something that can be placated by nice words or false promises. That's why Marlena and I are working to establish a university-wide cooperative education program.
Yeah, so a cooperative education program, more commonly known as a work-study program, is basically like you would alternate semesters working and studying. So ideally, a student would start either their freshman or their sophomore year. Most students would want to start at the university by studying and then go into an Austin-based company in the spring semester. They could extend it into the summer, and then that would already be 2 out of the 3 cycles. They could do more. And what's really great about this is that they would be earning a full salary, which is on average 8 to 10K higher for more technical positions.
Yeah, and something I really want to point out is that this is not just, a nice idea or like a false dream, right? This is something that already exists at a lot of other colleges, Georgia Tech and Northeastern to be specific, among others. And this is something companies already hire for. Even at UT, it exists within Cockrell School of Engineering, and we're working to expand it into a university-wide one.
Thanks, guys. Helen and William?
Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Getacho. I'm a sophomore majoring in Canfield Business Honors and Government.
Hi, y'all. My name is William Ramirez. I'm a third-year Economics and Humanities honors major with a minor in Mexican American Latino Studies.
I remember first entering here at UT, I really wanted to find a community here on campus, and one of the organizations I came across was student government. I wanted to join student government not only to find a community, but also to help advocate on behalf of other students. And as a first-generation student, accessibility to resources is very, very, very important to me, and I'm sure it's very important to students all across campus. And what I've noticed while trying to enter student government is not being able to, I came across various hurdles, and sometimes I believe that we're not at the forefront of administrative decisions. There are some resources that are often neglected, such as the website not being up to date or the contact office phone number not being in use. And through my time in student government, I've done a couple of initiatives, and I hope to further expand on them and improve accessibility through all of my policy platforms, as well as if we were to enter administration.
We are here as an SG administration to talk what is possible to get done here on campus. We're here to imagine an administration that's bold, creative, and loud when addressing student needs. We're here to imagine a future that centers student activists and students who have been marginalized at everything we do, especially as a student who's a first-gen, low-income, and student worker. I understand how it feels to be marginalized by this community or by this university. We're here to act as a vessel for students who have not been heard. We're here to no longer accept what we can't change, but change what we no longer accept. And that's tomorrow's Texas.
Thank you guys for sharing your platform with us. Let's move on to the first part of the general debate, during which I'll be asking questions directed towards all executive alliances. Candidates may choose whether to respond to each question, and you will have 1 minute to do so. Please raise the green card in front of you if you would like to respond, and I will call on you. We don't have to do this in any particular order, and if another executive alliance is mentioned by name, they will have the opportunity to provide a 30-second rebuttal. Do you guys have any questions before we begin? Great. Okay. So, what are your most significant contributions to campus? I think I saw William first.
I can talk on this. I currently live in Riverside and I have been for 2 years, and I think my biggest contribution to this university has been in being a part of being a coalition and organizer in that community. And we've advocated for bus transportation. We've advocated for tenant rights. Last February, actually, when all of these inconsistent bus schedules were happening, me and a couple organizers organized a spreadsheet where people would sign up and take people to campus, and that's what I was doing during my February semester last year. And during the summer, we held protests where we were advocating for students who live there and were getting like excessive move-out fees. And we were able, through our protest, to get in contact with the regional manager that came down to Dallas to be at our protest, and we essentially got that contact and spread it to the students who were having these issues, and they were able to get their fees personally looked at by the regional manager.
I think I saw Anna next.
Thank you. So George and I actually met in Hook the Vote, part of the student government agency, and so I'm currently serve as co-director, and something that stems from last year's agency is just the infrastructure that's in place to advocate for the voting rights of students. And so this past fall and during the midterm elections, I had the opportunity to work with a coalition of students across the university, and we were able to put pressure on local officials such as Travis County Judge Andy Brown, and we were able to secure an increase in polling machines in the FAC, which is the centralized polling location due to the change in polling locations prior to the midterm elections. And again, this was a joint effort, a coalition of students, and I think that that's something that we're very proud of.
Brian?
Sure. So like I said before, me and Diego, while we were reps in liberal arts, we did a lot of incredible things, but most importantly, one that means a lot to us, transparency. Something that happens in student government a lot is it's incredibly difficult to really get a taint of when you're just a regular student, not in these spaces. I was proud to be from day one. Y'all can check our Instagram right now. Every single week, anytime student government did anything, I would talk about it. Anytime that we did something outside of student government, I would talk about it. But the thing that I'm most proud of is when it comes to voter registration. Like Anna mentioned, I was also a part of that group that helped bring about those polling locations, those machines on campus. But more importantly, runoff elections. When UT Austin was not designated a polling location after the fact, it was myself, Rep. Holomek, and Diego, and a lot of other incredible people also on this stage who made sure that we got a polling location right here on campus so we could elect our own member of city council and fight to elect a very progressive mayor.
Thanks, guys. Harsh?
Hello. Yeah. So for me, my biggest area of focus ever since I've been in UT Austin has really been on helping low-income students. This has been an area that's really been dear to me because I've had several friends who've experienced it themselves, right? And particularly, I was serving in UT Senate as the fundraising co-chair last year, and we were responsible, as the name implies, for raising money for scholarships, and really evaluating those and giving them to students, based on the quality of their application and their profile. And by the end of the year, I think we'd given out around $18,000 in scholarship, and that's work that I'm really proud of personally.
Yeah, I'd like to add on that something that I'm continuously proud of is I'm actually an RA right now at a dorm of over 300 girls, which means that, being a sophomore last year, I came here with a fresh set of eyes. Now I get to experience that again, and I'm hearing the problems they're encountering firsthand, and hopefully I can fix that.
Thanks, everyone. My next question is, what do you believe? Oh my God, I'm sorry. That's my apology. Go
You're
ahead.
completely fine. I would say one of my two notable accomplishments most recently would be co-chairing and co-founding the DI caucus within Assembly, as well as working on an initiative across all members within the student government to work on the Gains Together program. For the DEI caucus, I initially co-founded it with a representative, Tristan, and I, after noticing the lack of diversity and inclusivity and how unwelcoming the legislative branch often was for various students across campus. And so over the summer, Rep Tristan and I created that to hopefully help that increase that inclusivity. And another initiative was the Gains Together program, where I worked with other members within the executive branch to make the existing gym facilities on campus more accessible for women and non-binary folks.
All right, thanks, guys. Okay, I think I might not have been clear. When I said each have 1 minute, it's 1 minute per alliance. Given that I wasn't clear about that, is there anyone else that would like to say anything for this question? Yeah, Diego?
So Brian touched upon all the work that we've done on civic engagement, so I won't retread that. I will add as a note of that, we were in competition with other schools for civic engagement, and we had the most number of registered voters, and we were very proud about that. Another thing that I'm proud that we were able to do, we were both an assembly board, and we helped shape the culture, especially given the last administration on all the issues that student government has historically had. I think the concerns about it being performative and being a lot of nice words are valid, but I would say that in this session, a new group of progressive legislators came in and we caused a lot of positive change. We helped with reproductive health, food insecurity, civic engagement, and accountability. I'd say that my greatest contribution to that was helping with the Assembly Accountability Act that helped shape the new rules and governing documents that student government currently has.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thanks, guys. And going forward, your alliance will have a minute, and you guys can split up that time how you want. One person can speak, two, however you guys want. So my next question is, what do you believe the role of student government should be on UT's campus? Harsh?
So to me, UT student government is really a mouthpiece for the student body, right? It's an amplifier, because I feel like a lot of times people confuse student government as this place that you can just plug in anything and just solve any issue, right? Student government does not have the bandwidth to address every single thing on campus by itself. The role of student government is to amplify the voices of other students themselves who are already working on these roles, right? Smaller organizations who are specialized in specific areas like safety or accessibility, financial affordability. All these things already exist on campus. There are organizations and students working on these projects. Student government's role is to advocate for them, to work alongside them, to amplify their work and their voices, and really to unite UT Austin in a more central area so that every student has a chance to really speak for themselves and push their work. That is the role of student government.
Diego?
I agree. I think that the main purpose of student government is to elevate students, but it's not just talk. We have a plan in place for how we're going to do that. We are going to go in and audit all of our agencies and ensure that the money is being spent in the way that it's supposed to be. This year, we already had to discontinue an agency because unfortunately they weren't managing their funds properly. And we want to go through and make sure every agency is efficient. And the agencies that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, we want to make sure that that money can go into special projects so the organizers that are on the ground and doing the real work have the means that they need in order to continue doing the projects that they pursue. Because another important thing the student government needs to know how to do is to not speak. Sometimes we are not the best people to speak, especially given the historic harm that student government has caused, and we should just step out of the way and let the people doing the real work in certain areas do that work and speak, because we do not want to speak over voices, and we don't want to accidentally co-opt groups that are doing the real work. Thank you.
Helen?
I think I have an interesting perspective on this. I think for the longest time, student government has been advocating for administration towards the students, and I wholeheartedly believe it should be student government advocating for students towards administration. I've been outside the LSO bubble for a while too, and when I've interacted with SG, it kind of sucks because they would come to you and telling you that they want to help you, and you tell them what you need help with, and they never follow up. For example, last year, an SG rep came up to us and they were talking about how they were gonna get us contracts for the lift shares and the relationship between Cap Metro and Riverside, and they never followed through with that promise, and it kind of sucked because we kind of depended on those resources. And I think if we had people who really cared in those positions, like organizers and people who have been marginalized in positions of power, SG would be a better place. And I think that's what the role of SG is.
George?
So I just want to touch on inclusion. So within student government, I believe it's student government's responsibility to create spaces for students outside of the general LSO space. And you know, a narrative that Anna and I have encountered whilst campaigning and even prior to is the fact that these spaces are really only being limited to the students in the LSO space. So I think that it is our responsibility as leaders within student government to not only create these spaces, I know I keep repeating that word, but it's, I mean that phrase, but yeah.
Yeah, so what we want to do is really bring in all students into the fray and ensure that we are as inclusive as possible. And again, I really liked what Diego had mentioned in not co-opting the work of students that are already on the ground and student organizers who are working above and beyond to ensure that all students are given equitable treatment.
Great. And for anyone not familiar, LSOs are legislative student organizations like student government. Okay. My next question for you is, what do you think is a weakness in your campaign? Brian?
I do find it funny. That was a slow one for all of us. Put up our hand. I think we're going to be honest. I mean, we're coming from a place, we're all very similar, coming from a lot of similar backgrounds. I think 3 people on this stage are reps, and then we are all from student government in one form or the other. And I think that in a large way is one of our greatest faults. I mean, I would love if we were standing up here and have a group that, you know, isn't entirely from student government. And I think that's something that we're trying to work towards every single day, is not just on this campaign, but something we've been trying to do for over the last year as reps, is to bring in people not already in these spaces. Like I mentioned before, student government can feel like such a daunting thing. I mean, we have a whole building and a fancy office, and students kind of ask themselves constantly, I don't feel any of the effect of what they are doing. I don't feel any safer. I don't feel any better. And that is something we're going to try to do every single day, is just bring in people from outside of this organization, try to bring them in, and try to do things that really do impact the entirety of student body and not just those inside.
Helen?
I would say a big weakness of mine, or even in our administration, would be that we're still learning. We did our very best when crafting these policies to make them as intentional as possible, as practical as possible, and as feasible as possible. However, at the end of the day, we are still students, and we can only do so much, but we are more than willing to grow and continue improving on our existing policy platforms so that we are ensuring that our policies are student-centered and are effective.
George?
So I just kind of want to mirror what Helen said. You know, we are students, so we are just learning, especially when it comes to the process of campaigning. And something that I have struggled with personally is communication. I think my comms director is in here, and at the beginning of the campaign cycle, we were having some troubles with graphics and communication, which seems like such a trivial issue. But for somebody that, you know, is like trying to lead a campaign, Anna and I, there always needs to be a facilitation of constant and clear communication, especially if we are seeking the elected capacities that we want to hold.
Yeah, definitely, and you know, I really like what Helen had said, that, you know, we are students at the end of the day, and we are all still learning, and you know, that's kind of the mindset that we should all be having. And in the event that we end up in an elected capacity, at the end of the day, we are students and still learning, and we still need to hold ourselves accountable.
Harsh?
Yeah, I definitely say that one big thing in our campaign is that we have a lot of really big ideas, right? And a lot of ways we want to help the student body, but you know, at the end of the day, really to just build off of what Helen was saying again, we are students, right? We are limited in our capacity, and we're still learning. And really what that means is that we have to basically learn to prioritize what we think is really important, right? And really listen to students, what they think is important, because it's not just up to me and Marlena, right? Student government's not the place for us to really make decisions for everyone else. It's for us to advocate for what everyone else wants. So yeah, really just like learning to prioritize and grow and adapt to the situation is like a really big thing for us.
Yeah, I would say as well, like with our cooperative education program, like that's a huge program to get running off the ground. And we've already been reaching out to Austin area companies. We've gotten positive responses, but for 2 people alone to do that is just crazy. So obviously working with a team.
Thanks, guys. My next question is, Each of your campaigns seeks to bridge the gap between student government and the student body by being more transparent. What is your specific actionable plan to accomplish this goal? Let's start with Harsh.
All right, so I think one of the biggest issues with inaccessibility in student government is the sheer amount of documentation you have to go through. Right? If you're just like a lazy student and you're like, hey, I wonder what SG's been doing this week, and you pull up like their website, you have to read like through 10 pages of something that you can barely even read if you're not used to it, right? And what I'm saying here is like, this is really, really bad for student engagement. We need to make it so that anything that student government is doing is conveyed in a very simple and concise manner, right? We should be pushing out like very clear and concise reports about, hey, this is what we did today. This is like a good idea of our policies and goals, and this is what activities have been going on.
Yeah, I would say as well that like the resources at UT, it's not like they don't exist. It's just that they're very hard to reach. You know, one of our values here is like individualism or independence, and we want to make it easier by putting all of the resources together into one hub, and then of course like personally leading with integrity.
Diego?
We believe that a big part of that is transparency. As Brian mentioned earlier, our Instagram has things going all the way back from day one. And I believe that we have more followers on Instagram than the main student government assembly Instagram, which is unacceptable. We're just 2 people. The institutional power of student government should have farther reach than that. I also think an important part of that is atoning for the history of student government. Part of what we want to do is establish a historical commission to go through daily Texan archives and go through our legislative archives and look at all the harm that student government has caused so we can account for it and the student body can hold us accountable.
Yeah, so much like Diego mentioned, talking about the Instagram again, I encourage you if you're watching, after the fact or right now, Diego and Brian 2023, that was my biggest thing. I helped someone my freshman year who was running for rep, and I kind of got the idea from them, but I made sure to keep up with it. And the biggest thing is being accessible to student body. I hope that a majority of people here and at home have seen me on Speedway yelling really loud. People, I apologize if I'm disrupting you if I'm talking to you with your headphones, but yeah, being out there.
Helen?
This is a really good question, and we do have an answer to this in our DEI memo. We have an initiative called the T3S Summit, where we would outreach to primarily identity-based organizations with the idea of 3 things: documentation, preparation, and persistence, in the sense that a lot of things are not properly documented, and then a lot of times when students graduate, initiatives die out because people don't really know what happened and people make the same mistakes. So preparation for those things.
Yes, and part of the reason why we believe that would bridge the gap between student government and various communities on campus is because we'll play a proactive role in using the fall semester to go to various student organizations on campus, gauge student input, and in the spring semester, implement those solutions so that all various organizations on campus feel as though they have a voice and feel as though that their problems are being addressed.
George?
So in terms of policy, I think that we as student government leaders owe it up to the general student body to highlight things that are digestible. So I think that within student government, a lot of us are government majors and we can kind of get stuck on like the legalese of all these things and we want things to sound intelligent and whatnot, but it needs to be digestible so that way it is transparent and students know exactly what they're getting. And I know I keep saying this, but as student government leaders, we really do need to open up the fray to the more general student body and not just LSO students. And in terms of the internal environment within student government, there needs to be a constant streamline of communication, because if there's not communication, then there's no transparency. And that comment shouldn't be taken out of context in terms of you need to tell everybody everything all at once, but everybody needs to be in the know, especially if you're working within student government.
Thank you, guys. All right. My next question for you is, all of you have set lofty goals, but if elected, your alliance will only have 1 year to execute them. How will you decide which policies to prioritize, and how will you build the infrastructure to ensure that progress is made even after your term? Diego.
Already. So yes, one of the highlights of our policy that we feel comes to voter engagement. So these are things that we think we can get done by May. This upcoming May, there is an incredibly important election about police oversight. We have already begun working towards this. Just a few days ago, me, Diego, Rep. Polomek, a lot of other people on the stage signed a statement urging City Council to work towards making sure the people of Austin, including students, have a voice in May. We've already met this past week with the Office of Judge Andy Brown and made a firm commitment. He made a firm commitment to us that we are going to have sufficient amount of polling locations here on campus. But the biggest thing, voter registration. There are so many students coming to UT Austin for the first time who've just turned 18, coming from different counties. We want to register as many of them as possible. Last year through University Democrats, we registered over 3,000 students. We're the campaign right now. We're actively on Speedway registering students right now. So we think by the May election, we can significantly push for our civic engagement goals.
George?
So a lot of our initiatives, when we were crafting these, we were very honest with ourselves, and we acknowledged the fact that some of our goals are going to take time. For instance, in our reproductive justice policy point, a partnership with the DA, we're aware of the fact that that is a partnership that has begun to be constructed in the event that even if we aren't elected, we want to have that infrastructure in place, and that's something that we've been doing on a lot of our initiatives. For instance, our food insecurity platform point, we have started the infrastructure, and for some of our civic engagement things, we're aware of the fact that some of our voter education initiatives are initiatives that won't be able to go in effect in this next fall. However, we want to lay out the blueprint for next executive alliances to be able to build off of what we have started and the ideas that have been that have come out of this campaign season.
Helen?
First off, while drafting our various policy platforms, one of the main things we wanted to prioritize is ensuring that relevant stakeholders are at the center of the policies that we're crafting. And so we want to ensure that we reach out to those various organizations so that they are able to at least get the resources to have it be sustainable and live off even if we were to finish an administration. And one of our most notable, I believe, platform points would be T3S. If you want to elaborate more on it.
Yes, this will allow us to elaborate a little more where a lot of this is documentation because, for example, it was, I believe, 2022 where survivor justice advocates led a protest in the President's Hall, but a lot of people don't really know about that unless it's from word of mouth. And an initiative like this will allow people to know about these initiatives and be prepared for future protests along those lines and be able to be persistent. And I think a lot of things is acknowledging that student government.
Sorry. Next time you're welcome to finish the sentence if, time is called.
Okay.
If you can finish it if you want.
And I think at the moment it's acknowledging that student government doesn't have the best relationship with the student body, and it's amending those wrongs and there's a difference between outreaching to people and interacting with the community.
Harsh?
Yeah, so like I've sort of mentioned before, our focus is making sure that our policies and our efforts are really student-driven. And the way we plan on doing this is by assembling committees in student government, a lot of which already exist in specific areas like finance or safety, really whatever area of interest the representatives have, and getting these representatives, these committees, to work to find other organizations on campus that are doing similar types of work, right? Seeing that their work aligns with our missions and really promoting it in that sense. It's a bottom-up approach where we get the work of other organizations, we give them the resources they need to push it through, and we push it up to the top that way.
Yeah, so really emphasizing student involvement. One of our main pillars is the cooperative education program, which finances, everybody cares about finances, whether you're in need or whether you're not. And we're also, of course, willing to shift focus based on student feedback if that means focusing on paid internships more than that.
All right, thanks guys. Our next question is, student government often works closely with UT administration to enact change on campus. What relationship do you seek to build with administrators, and how will you make progress even when their goals differ from yours? Diego?
While our goals a lot of the time differ from administrations, the Eyes of Texas referendum is a perfect example of that. I think that it's important to work and see what goals you do share with administration. At the end of the day, administration doesn't like having people protest. They don't like seeing statement articles against them. And the students like the things that they pass to actually go into effect. So I think that managing that relationship between leveraging your public influence while also working towards the goals the administration wants to accomplish. I'm sure administration wants to work towards affordability, they want to work towards accessibility, and they want to work towards other issues like that. We just have to market it to administration in a way that they will be more receptive to it. We have a history of doing that. We have done the work. We have passed legislation that administration has approved. It's just about tailoring it so administration will let it through.
And really quickly, the biggest thing is there are things that we can get done that are simply beyond UT Austin, beyond anything administration says we can't do. That means working with our city council, working with our Austin commissioner, with our state legislator, our mayor. We can go beyond UT admin if we need to.
Lana?
Sorry about that. Yeah, so something that we have both discussed is that, first of all, being in that kind of position as an elected representative of the student body is a privilege, and we both fully intend to utilize our positionality to hold administration accountable. And hopefully, George and I were discussing that some of our policy points, we're sure that we're going to face interference by the UT administration, and that's why we have also begun to seek support outside of the university. And I'll go ahead and let my running mate elaborate on that.
And something else I want to touch upon is, something that Anna and I really connected on when we decided to run together was the fact that we have often had to sit across the table from people that didn't necessarily look like us or believe in anything that we believed in, but we've always been able to reach some sort of semblance of common ground, and that's what we are going to have to do in our elected capacities with admin, because there's no doubt with the initiatives that not only we have proposed, but everybody on this stage that you will have to reach common ground.
Harsh?
Yeah, I would say that as immigrants, Harsh and I both have experience in relating different perspectives to one another. Personally, I've been in quite a few advocacy roles where I act as a liaison between students and administration, whether that's my role as an RA or in student gov, Moody College of Communication, whatever. I think that the most important thing with establishing this kind of a relationship is leading with trust, integrity, reliability, and of course, finding common ground, right? Focus on what you can compromise on.
Yeah, and really at the end of the day, our goal is to maximize our interest, the interest of the students, while giving just enough to admin to where they'll actually say yes. It's really like a min-maxing problem, and we know that it's better to take a few small steps than try to just push for a really big thing that admin will never change their stance on. Because over time, you can make progressive change, but you have to do it step by step.
William?
That is a really good question, and that is something that we kept in mind while drafting these policies, because we recognize while there are already existing resources within administration that can help implement some of these initiatives, that always isn't the case. And in order to actually make effective progress, we as an administration, as a student body, need to find alternative efforts to still make progress. And so in our policies, we made sure to have two different types of solutions, ones that work with existing faculty and existing systems within administration, as well as reaching out to relevant organizations who are already doing the work on the ground, and to have us be more so a vessel to just amplify their work.
To continue answering the question, we have to be quite transparent that administration has had a history of silencing students and silencing student organizers. So I think our job as SG is to be a united front for those people that we uplift in our administration, and making sure that their initiatives are protected with integrity, and that their initiatives are not folded when we go into those rooms with administration.
Great, thank you guys. So my next question is, no student government administration is perfect. Mistakes will be made. How will you maintain a strong accountability structure to own up to any mistakes made during your tenure? Diego.
Transparency, transparency, transparency. If you go back, we have been posting from day one, but we have not just been posting our wins since day one. We post everything. We're very open because we believe that student government should be for students, by students, and part of that means students that aren't in the legislative space holding us accountable and saying, look, you said that you were going to do this. You said you were going to do it in a year. It's been a year, and you still haven't done it. A big part of that as well is having a public timeline for all of our initiatives. If we were elected, we want to have a timeline so students can come, they can see, and they can hold us accountable. Because if we say we're going to get something done in 1 year, we're going to get it done in 1 year, and if we don't, you can call us on it.
Yeah, and I think a big part is being accessible to the student body. I think that there's a lot of students that sometimes they don't see the president and the VP or any of us a long time. So I think something as simple as just being on Speedway, that's something that we have been over a year. I'm personally there. Hopefully I've seen your faces, you've seen mine a couple days a week, every week. Just making sure you have the ability to come up and talk to us and address situations like that.
George?
So I'll kind of mirror what Diego said. I do believe that transparency is key. Something that we, even throughout this entire campaign cycle, Anna and I have always focused on transparency. Even there has to be an acknowledgement when there are faults, even if you are the leader, and you need to be able to acknowledge those faults and give an explanation as to why things happened and how you're going to go about fixing it. Even during this campaign cycle, when we started formulating our policy, we promised not only ourselves but our team that we would write relevant policy, which included meeting with student leaders. And something that we did prior to the campaign cycle is we met with student leaders in an organization on campus, and that was seen as pre-campaigning by some. And so our campaign faced a moratorium. And so we were transparent about it. We released a statement about it, and we were very clear with our team in terms of what that meant. And not only just our team, but our larger support system. And we even posted a statement about it, which is still on our social media, which just indicates that transparency is always key.
Harsh?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying that I really, really believe in being an open book. If you've met me personally, you know that to be true. I like to talk a lot. But Harsh and I, we are not politicians, okay? I would say that starting this whole process, transparency has been one of the biggest, most important values to us. I personally have gone to talk to my PR professor several times because what you see is exactly what you're going to get, okay? And of course, mistakes will be made, but that's why accountability is so important. My major is communication and leadership. That basically means I focus on ethical communication, okay? And in order not to violate the trust of the people we're representing, we have to remain open and honest about where we fall short.
Yeah, and something important that I want to emphasize is even just outside of student government or any organization, being true to ourselves is a value that Marlena and I really do share. We are always honest with each other, and that is something we plan to continue doing when we're working for students.
William?
Something that I've noticed that we have been throughout our whole campaigning period is authentic, and we hope to continue that if we were to enter administration. And transparency is very important to us, which is why we ensured that we implemented or we proposed initiatives that valued that. And some of that includes SG updates and utilizing social media, websites to ensure that students are up to date with what's going on within SG. But not only that, because of a lot of our initiatives involve reaching out and collaborating with various student organizations, one of the ways that we want to be transparent and further strengthen trust is by providing updates to those organizations periodically.
To wrap up really quickly, I think the first step to anything restorative in SG is taking accountability, and from there it's working with those who want to work with us, right? Because at the end of the day, we cannot take back the harm we did to those students who have been wronged by SG.
Last question before our little break. Student housing has been a long-standing concern, especially as rent prices go up and the student body size increases. Do you think student government has a role to play in addressing this issue? Harsh.
All right, so yeah, lack of transparency around student housing is really a big issue for a lot of us, right? Like when I was going around looking for housing personally, I had to spend like a whole week just walking around campus. Like my steps that week were insane. And my point with this really is that there's no central location for us to find this information, and that's really bad for students that really need this more than anything else. There are already organizations on campus. In particular, one page that we like is UT Housing Transparency that consolidates all of this information into just one area for students to look at. And we were inspired by that idea to really consolidate it into something that student government can put on their website.
To clarify, that goes by type of room, rates change, and we also plan to make a centralized hub for dorm prices too.
Yeah, bottom line is this is something that should be centralized in a very easily accessible way, and that's something we fully plan on doing.
Helen?
This is a really good question, especially because someone who's dealt with the housing crisis in Austin, because this summer I almost didn't have any place to stay for the upcoming year. So luckily I found something again in Riverside, like last minute. But I think we do have a very concrete plan to addressing this by starting by addressing the housing crisis for graduate students. And there are already initiatives started by the university that we could put our input in. For example, the 2015 East Campus Master Plan for graduate students, and also implementing housing and on Guad, for example, in Goodwill Woodton dormitory on Guad. It has been there for 65 years, and I think UT has a responsibility to, one, invest back into its community, and two, provide graduate housing. And by doing that, we can find funding. And What Starts Here's campaign, because it's going to allocate $1 billion towards students. And there's also student reports, such as the CT back, that does make recommendations that students want more on-campus housing. So it's very feasible, and we think it can get done.
George?
So George and I have been discussing about how affordability could be, we have both discussed that we both think that affordability is one of the biggest pressing issues that students face in their day-to-day lives. As the cost of living here in Austin, Texas just continues to rise astronomically. And, speaking from personal experience, I know, there's been nights where I'm not able to sleep because I'm just thinking about how I'm going to make it, be able to pay my next month's rent. And so that's something that we have both discussed. And, as our positions within student government, we would also hold city officials accountable and work with, for instance, city council. We have our city councilman who has advocating for affordable housing, and we would love to be able to work alongside him and a lot of other local officials.
Diego?
Yeah, so first off, we have a lot of housing policy. A lot of what we're doing is talking about housing, so I encourage you to check out our Instagram about more. But the university neighborhood overlay, essentially what that is, it is the current reason why West Campus looks the way it does. Several years ago, City Council passed something that UNO stands for, that essentially creates an agreement between a lot of the larger apartment buildings that allows them to build higher in exchange for creating a minimum amount of specific units in their buildings that have to be below submarket rate, smart housing. So essentially, what UNO does is it makes sure that all of these buildings have to have a minimum amount of smart housing units in every single apartment. If we expand this within West Campus, making sure that we raise the amount of minimum, but also making sure that we expand this into North Campus. Like Anna said, we have a councilman that's willing to talk to us about this. We've already worked with Councilman Vela, Councilman Kadri, Ora, and a lot of other incredible individuals in the city level who have already said we are ready to do this. They talked about it at their campaigns, who we worked with, and we're ready to get it done at city council level.
Thanks, guys. Let's take a 5-minute break, and I'll see you all at 7:06.
I think we did good.
Hope everyone had a very nice, very brief break. Welcome back to the general debate. Let's begin the second part. Same rules as before apply. I will ask a question, and each alliance will have 1 minute to answer. Executive alliances that are mentioned by name are allowed a 30-second rebuttal. Any questions? Okay. My first question is, up to 44% of college students have reported having symptoms of depression and anxiety, and college students face a disproportionate risk for suicide. How can you help improve campus resources and help destigmatize these issues? George?
So this is a personal issue to me last semester, and I've been very open about this. I did have to withdraw because for the first time in my life, I truly was struggling with my mental health. And I sought out resources at CMHC, and that's when I realized just how limited these resources were. Several months after the fact, I became aware of the UTSA model that allots for 8 semesterly sessions with a therapist. And given the fact that UTSA is a UT filter school, I don't understand why we cannot do the same and why we cannot allocate the same amount of funding to expand the therapy system here as well. These are resources that are so necessary because mental health issues are so pertinent to the general student body, and they're issues that every single student faces. There's just not an open dialogue about that, and we as student leaders owe it to the general student body to openly talk about these issues.
Harsh?
Yeah, so this is actually one that I have a bit of personal experience with. During my freshman year, when I came into UT, a lot of stuff happened, and I really was in the worst position in my life that I've ever been in. And naturally, I was like, I think I need help, and I looked for support from CMHC. And they have 3 free sessions, which was really nice, and it was really good for me to have that sort of support and what I got from it. But really, I felt like it's something that could be so much bigger, right? There could be so much more for students because that wasn't enough for me. That wasn't enough for anyone. And it's something that we need to expand to be much more holistic and to really be able to support systems properly, support students properly the way any mental health system should.
Diego?
I think that the fact that every executive alliance so far has had to directly deal with the CMHC is perfect proof that this is something that needs to be fixed. And while we could share our experience, we would also like to talk about things that we would like to do to fix this. One of the biggest things that we would like to talk about, the vice president is the chair for the SSBC, and the SSBC is responsible for partially funding the CMHC. And we want to make sure that when we are having those conversations about where our money is going, it's going to the CMHC because it's very obvious that this needs to be fixed. But we also want to implement policy within the CMHC to fix it.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that we've heard from our friends and even ourselves is a lot of these resources are incredibly difficult to access during the winter, during the summer, and when you're not specifically taking classes right now. Our biggest thing is making sure that we expand these resources to be as accessible as possible any time of the year, as long as you are enrolled in classes, whether that be in between semesters or in between your school year during the summertime. And the other thing is care counselors, which are specifically designated as specific. Hope I can elaborate sometime soon.
Helen?
Yes, mental health is a very important issue for me as someone who's experienced imposter syndrome. It's very hard, and oftentimes you try to reach out to existing resources and they may not be as of much help as you hoped it would have been. And so one of the ways that we intend on addressing mental health is through various initiatives such as wellness days, so that when you are experiencing issues, you're able to take the day off without any questions being asked. Another thing is, as Diego had mentioned, CMHC is funded through SSB funding, and what we hope to do is allocate some of that funding to help improve programs and start branching off to create programs that provide services to non-emergency needed services, and also utilizing the Healthy Longhorns text messages to have more inclusive language.
Great, thank you. Okay, my next question is, it has been 8 years since campus carry was legalized, requiring Texas public universities to allow concealed carrying of guns on campus. What is your stance on this policy, and what do you have to say to students who are concerned about gun violence? Brian.
Like you said, campus, the fact that students here on UT Austin still have the ability to bring a gun on campus, whether that's concealed or not, is absolutely insane. We have heard from countless students who are genuinely scared, including myself. There is absolutely no reason for anyone whatsoever that there should be any reason that UT is allowing something like this, especially when they are taking policies to ban some other things that we all know what we're talking about and a lot of other things. Our biggest thing is there is a lot of weird nuance to getting this solved, but a big one is trying hard to work with our state legislators. Something we've done over the last year is have a good working relationship with the entirety of the Travis County state legislator delegation and making sure that when we go to them, obviously legislation is hard to pass as a minority party in the state, but making sure they put pressure as elected officials that represent countless UT students to put pressure on UT to end this policy and really start to reform the way we think about guns on campus.
William?
This is a really good question, and I don't believe that has a lot of nuance to it. I don't think anyone should be allowed to hold guns on campus. I think it's a very big safety issue. Especially, I think it would disproportionately affect BIPOC folks on campus, especially. I feel like it's clear, like, if a BIPOC person was to be holding a gun, it's a clear, different message if a white person were to be holding a gun. And I think we should eliminate that safety issue on campus, because at the end of the day, this is about safety. I don't think guns provide that safety people talk about. I think funding programs like the CMHC provide what we need, also provide other programs that are not emergency, also provide safety. I think we have to redirect what we think of safe and what guns do in that sense.
Anna?
So since 2023 has started, I think we have all seen one of the most deadliest massacres since the start of the year, and it's truly, truly devastating. And we 100% condemn these policies. And as an LSO, we want to really uplift, invest in Texas, and really put pressure on the Texas legislature to do something about this issue. And, again, I think William brings up a really, really important point that this is an issue that, again, is really rooted in systemic racism. And I think that there needs to be a very specific way in which we address it. And so I think that, again, uplifting Invest in Texas and working with the other LSOs and putting pressure on the Texas legislature, we can begin to make a difference so that we can work to make campus far safer.
Harsh?
Yeah, something I want to point out is this is not just like an idea that seems scary, it's something that's already harmed all of us on campus. Last year, I think around Halloween weekend, there's an active shooter on campus, and it was pretty close to where I lived at the time. And that event really scared me, right? If I just gone outside, decided to just hang out with my friends, even just visit the local Insomnia cookies nearby, I could have been caught out in the open there, and this is true for any student, right? There's no way that we should be able to walk outside and have the threat of actual guns pointed at our face. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, last year I was a scared little freshman, and I downloaded the app Citizen. I don't know if y'all have heard of it, but it shows you the real crime updates in your area. Like Harsh said, that definitely popped up and scared us. And the question we really have to ask ourselves is, do we want this type of a responsibility to be on each person to download an app to know whether they're safe or not?
My next question is, experts predict that the U.S. Supreme Court will decide the fate of affirmative action in June 2023, right as the new executive alliance terms begin. With many expecting them to overturn the policy, do you think student government has a role to play in preserving racial diversity on campus? And if so, what? Brian?
As you can see from all of our reaction, this is not a simple solution. This is one of those issues where, I'm going to be honest, there are a lot of things that we can say up here to say how we're going to attempt our best to reverse this or try to insulate UT Austin from the effects of it, but we can't. It is a very difficult policy, and I think our best plan forward, if or when that happens and the Supreme Court does decide to make that ruling, is that we reach out to experts in the area, we reach out to experts in the state, We have a lot of incredible faculty here in UT Austin who are experts in this area. And that is going to be, if or when that happens, that is going to be our first response. Going out to those faculty members, reaching out to anyone that we know are actual, genuine experts on this subject, and having them inform us on what the best policy forward is. Because in the end, we would hate to possibly say something or do something that ends up causing more harm than good, because in the end, we are not experts on this issue, and it is something far wider and far reaching than any one of us.
Helen?
This is a very good question. I think the first thing we need to do to combat this, the case that might happen, right, is first thing is strengthening the resources that we already have here on campus, like the MEC and GSC, because those services serve like around 4,000 students a semester. And if we were to make them more visible and create that space for those students, I think it would be a lot harder to minimize diversity at our school. And another thing I think we should do as a campus is outreach into Title I schools. I think it's unfair that a lot of students who do come to school are from elite schools. For example, there's only one recruiter in the RGV, when the RGV is a big place. And I think if we were to expand those outreaching services to those areas, it would increase diversity at our school. And that's it.
Harsh?
Yeah, so the overturning of affirmative action, if it were to happen, is something that directly threatens diversity, at UT and really just everywhere. Now, as students, we don't necessarily have the power to directly challenge this law, but we do have the power to still push for the core issue, which is diversity. We do have the power to make sure that every student, regardless of their background or their identity, is heard on campus and is included the way that they should be. You want to elaborate?
Yeah, I think that Harsh said it beautifully. Maintaining our emphasis on diversity, especially, in choosing our team, I think that's one of the most important values going forward, regardless of what the state ends up deciding. Because as Harsh said, every person needs to be represented and heard and fought for.
Anna?
As Brian mentioned earlier, this is just a gargantuan topic, and it's very, very difficult to address as student leaders, because there's just such a limitation as to what we can do. But something that both George and I have proposed within our diversity, equity, and inclusion pillar is working to implement a financial aid task force. And this is something that was, it was something that was birthed out of this something that Dr. Moore had told George, which is that Black and brown students, BIPOC students, are often faced with not having enough financial aid when it comes to attending this university. And so what we want to do is, again, implement the financial aid task force, which would be overseen by the appointed financial director, and in which we will research the disparities in financial aid distributions in order to advocate for more equitable distributions of these funds.
In response to a changing climate and increasingly severe weather, students have been calling for divestment. Do you think UT should divest from fossil fuels, and what are other ways to address the issue of sustainability on campus? Diego?
I think divestment is probably the best course to take as far as it goes for long-term change with our climate policy. We understand that we are in Texas, and Texas is a very oil-run economy, but at the end of the day, oil's not gonna be here forever, and if what starts here changes the world, we need to start changing the world by finding another way to fund our school. On top of that, we want to try to commit to a carbon zero plan. There have been a lot of organizers on the ground facilitating this plan, and instead of creating an agency, we want to ensure that we have the budget in our special projects fund to help towards these goals and to make sure that these organizers have a voice in the committees where it's relevant, like the Transportation Committee.
And really quickly, something that's been a big part of our campaign when it comes to climate, right now there is potential the expansion of I-35 by the Texas Department of Transportation. If you ever get a chance to come talk to us, there are so many reasons why this is a horrible, horrible idea, but the biggest one, essentially it would be like adding a massive multi-million-dollar coal plant in the middle of the city of Austin. We can expand, and that's a big policy we're going to fight for in City Council.
Marlena?
Yeah, so I would say that like it's a great idea. Obviously, the planet needs it. Specifically, proposing a gradual transition to renewable resources. Right, this is not something that can happen overnight. Me being from Germany, if you look at Germany's environmental policies, they're about 20 years ahead of the U.S. Kudos. However, I think it is also important to recognize that UT is built on oil and gas connections. That is where a lot of the donors come from, hence the emphasis on a gradual transition.
The point is that it should be something that is realistic and sustainable because we have already seen how it works across the rest of the world, and we need to follow their lead to make sure that we really approach this in a way that allows UT to sustain its momentum, right? Not just like try something, fail, and then never try it again. We need to make sure that's feasible and realistic.
Helen?
We have a pretty ambitious goal for this one. We wanted to address what the university currently has through the campus sustaining policy and the sustainable master plan. A lot of these plans did not have student input, and a lot of these plans don't plan to change. In the near future, a lot of them have clauses that, if necessary, meaning that their last option is a renewable source. And I think we should have a task force of students in those spaces, especially environmental justice advocates such as who have been working towards these initiatives.
If George and Anna don't want to say anything, we can...
I just kind of want to mirror what Marlena said in terms of a gradual transition. This isn't something that can occur overnight, but Anna and I are fully in support of the divestment of these resources, and this is a very real issue that the general student has faced, especially in terms of, I know we're juniors here, so we've been here for 3 years. Our freshman year, we went through the winter storm, which I'm sure most people in this room also suffered through, and that was something that was incredibly difficult. There was no food, there was not, and certain dormitories didn't even have air conditioning, so people were having to leave the places where they live. And yeah, no.
Okay, on to our next question. With over 50,000 students on our campus, the UT student body is comprised of people from all kinds of backgrounds with varying political and personal beliefs. How will you handle and strike a balance between these opposing viewpoints while ensuring that students feel heard? Anna?
Something that both George and I kind of connected on when we first met was that we both are from areas that have hold kind of predominantly right-leaning views, and both of us really don't align with any of that. And so kind of growing up, we always had to facilitate these conversations that had to do with bridging a gap with people that think things like absolute opposite to what we believe in and what we hold to be true. And so I think that in the event that we're elected, we want to ensure that that kind of dialogue is fostered across the organization and that we're able to foster these kinds of conversations across the university.
Marlena?
Yeah, so this is actually an area where Marlena and I have had a lot of personal experience in, both as immigrants to the United States, right? We've lived in environments that have completely different rules and expectations and moved to a completely new place that didn't understand any of that, right? We've had to learn to balance our old experience with our new ones and really build an identity that encompasses the best of both, to really understand and bridge both groups of people.
Yeah, I mean, Harsh and I, we have a lot of different opinions, you know, just like this team itself. It's about compromise and choosing your battles. My mom likes to talk about this old analogy of 10 people in a room. Every person has a different perspective. They argue, they call each other names, but they leave with a broader understanding of somebody else's point of view. And while we don't want to encourage calling each other names, we do want to encourage conversation. You know, just because you have different opinions doesn't mean that it has to divide us. And we want to encourage all opinions, specifically through our committees, which would involve student clubs and students from all over campus with different values.
Diego?
We think coalition building is key. While two groups may on their face not seem very similar, there are common goals that everybody would love to strive towards, and that's something that we want to focus on. Everybody wants accessibility. Everybody wants to be able to afford to go to college. Everybody wants to be able to participate in the classroom, regardless of where you come from. These are very basic things that everybody wants. Part of that also is making sure that you are getting everybody's point of view. SG historically has not been a place where everyone feels comfortable to speak, and we want to change that. And when we are crafting our executive board, we also want to make sure that we're pulling from all over the student body because we want those voices to be present at the table.
Yeah, in a very similar sentiment, not just within the executive board, but something that people forget about student government. There are countless appointments to a whole host of committees. I'm sure there's a lot of people here on the stage and out in the audience and watching right now who are part of these committees. These are the best opportunities for students to really have an incredible impact, and making sure that we have a wide variety of appointees on these. I think student government, it varies in the amount that we get, but making sure they're diverse. Thank you.
Helen?
Yes, confronting opposing viewpoints can be difficult for a lot of people, but something that we hope our administration does is understand and try to listen. As chair of the EOT committee, one of the things I encountered was opposing viewpoints, and through my time working with that committee, I've learned to listen and inform and do my best to educate, and that's what I hope to continue doing if we were to enter administration.
Okay, this is my last question before we'll turn it over to the audience and some submitted questions. A lot of the discussion today has oriented around things that can be improved or changed, but what do you think are positives of UT's campus and culture that should be preserved or bolstered? Anna?
So, you know, like I said, I've had experience within the internal and external executive branch of student government. I think that's something that has really changed is this environment of student government as a whole, and that's something that we would definitely love to expand on, as well as a few initiatives that the current administration has worked on, such as the Student Business Empowerment Initiative and the Free Headshot Initiative at the co-op. And these are things that we would love to sustain and continue to see these partnerships in fruition and continue with the amazing work that the current administration has inaugurated during their time, and hopefully gradually build onto these amazing things, such as the kind of shift within student government, as well as those initiatives, and also build onto the food distribution initiative.
Marlena?
This is actually one of my personal favorites, the diversity at UT. You come here, you meet people from all different walks of life, and if you're open to it, it can actually teach you a lot. Additionally, there's a lot of opportunity here. You can really become whoever you want, and it's just about giving the students the opportunity in their hand.
Yeah, and really to add on top of that is like this idea of Longhorn pride, right? It's really something that does unite all of us, because all of us know that OU sucks. All of us know that campus walks are quite big, and you really get your steps in. And at the end of the day, all of us are Longhorns, right? And coming to college, I mean, it's a completely new environment. And I was overwhelmed at first, but the kind of support I got from UT, from the students, from the sense of unity that we have, is something that was really, really important to me. And I think is important to anyone at this campus, because ultimately that's what unites us, and that's what is really good about UT.
William?
This is a really good question, and I think it has a really good answer. I think something that UT should preserve is the ethnic studies programs. I love everything in the ethnic studies programs, going from Oz to ads to anything that's entertainized. I feel like in my Mexican American Latino studies program, I feel like everyone in the classes I meet are like my second family. I feel like in those programs, I never need to explain myself again, or never need to explain what I experience in a different manner. I think those programs are very important to cultivating culture on our campus, especially right now, since the legislation is currently attacking those programs because they deem them as unworthy, and that they're teaching, that they're, I can't find the word, but essentially they're being attacked by Dan Patrick, and I don't think that's the stuff to do, and I think we should fund them and protect them with all we can, especially malls.
Diego?
I think the culture of collaboration that we've formed within student government has been great. We've had a lot of disagreements in student government, but at the end of the day, a lot of us are still friends outside of student government, and we're able to talk about issues we disagree with each other on outside of student government as well. We like the Student Business Empowerment Initiative that was started by the last administration, and we would love to continue that. We have loved the food distribution, and if you check our policy points, we want to expand that to include more people. The contraceptive vending machine initiative was started within student government last semester, and we want to make sure that that continues through our organization and our administration.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest thing I am so incredibly proud of UT Austin is the fact that we came out and vote. Maybe it's not as high as the numbers as it could be, and we're going to keep trying to get them higher, but we have done an incredible job at showing the entire state, and especially showing Travis County, that students do care about these issues. I look forward to continuing to work with me and Anna on Hook the Vote and all the other incredible organizations who are doing registration efforts, because every single time that students show up to vote, people notice, and I love that about UT.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. So the next portion of our debate will include submitted and in-person questions. In-person audience members are given up to 30 seconds to ask their question. Questions should be directed at a specific alliance, to all executive alliances, or any executive alliance who wish to answer. No follow-ups or back-to-back questions are allowed. As during the general debate, candidates are given 1 minute to respond, and executive alliances that are mentioned by name are allowed a 30-second rebuttal. Go ahead.
Hello. I consider myself generally apolitical when it comes to student government. I honestly don't really know what you guys do. So I think something that would be helpful for the whole audience is each of y'all telling us what you think student government should do, or what y'all's job is. I think that will help us all understand your vision for this school and student government better, and also help me understand what y'all do. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess if it's directed at everyone, we can just do the cards. Okay. Okay, Marlena.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously student government is an amplifier. We are a voice for the students. That's nothing new. But part of that means being accessible to y'all, right? The more technical side means passing legislation. So as Diego mentioned earlier, something that we've been working on this past year in the 116th is implementing a Plan B vending machine on campus. That's still underway, but that's one example of something that would directly affect many students. So implementing change, hopefully.
Helen?
There are very technical aspects of student government, such as the judicial, legislative, executive branch, which I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with, that models off of the regular government. But I feel like the best way to describe the role student government should play, at least, is just a vessel for change, and utilizing the existing structures to do so. And I don't know if you have anything else to add, William.
I think it's very important that student government becomes a vessel for change. I think that we should very much center marginalized voices and student activists. I think it's at least very important to me, since I partake in a lot of these communities, and a lot of the people I care about are brown, black, and queer, and I want to make sure that they're safe. If there's anything I want to do to our positionality here, is make sure that the communities I care for are good, because I will fight for them, and if anything I can do in any regards.
Diego?
Thank you. I'm sure most students feel the same way that you do. The issue with student government, besides our publicity, is that a lot of the stuff that we do kicks in way after anyone who ever had anything to do with it is gone. One of the biggest things that student government is responsible is SureWalk. That's an agency. A lot of people don't see SureWalk and think of student government. There's other work that agencies do. Hook the Vote does amazing work as well, and that's run through student government. I think the most impactful long-term change that student government has really had has been the agencies, but also our appointments. People hear a lot about PSAC. Student government has an appointee to the Presidential Student Committee, and just those institutional forces that student government has helped create, just a lot of people don't know about them, but if they disappeared, a lot of people would be missing things that they rely on.
Yeah, and to me, something that I think we are a little bit lacking right now is we, in my honest opinion, is that we should be able to be the mouthpiece, not just to administration and to other members of student government, but to the city council, to Travis County Commissioners Court. Over the last year, we have seen strong commitments from countless elected officials that they want to work with us. They have worked with us, and we look forward to keep doing that.
Anna?
Of course. So something that George and I were talking about earlier before the debate is that student government is designed to serve as the voice of the students. And something that we were talking about is that if you were to ask a student who represents you, and who represents you within this institution, there would probably be a hesitancy in answering this question just because of the lack of awareness. And so that is what student government is supposed to be. And I'll go ahead and let my running mate kind of add on to that.
So as student government, or anybody in student government and anybody that occupies leadership positions within student government owes it to the people that they represent to be their voice. And that, I know I keep bringing this up, but the fray needs to be opened up to the general student population in terms of different groups of people. And something that William touched on was, or the groups that William touched on as in Black, brown, queer people at this university, they're subsets of the population that are often cut off or not listened to. And that needs to change, because we're the voice for all students.
Okay, let's have our next audience question.
Okay, so we've talked a lot today about affordable housing and things of that nature. I noticed that Dobie hasn't come up in this discussion at all, which I find pretty unacceptable as a resident of Dobie, and specifically because Dobie is UT's only by name affordable housing initiative. So for those of you who don't know, Dobie is extremely pricey. We've had week-long floods. I personally actually had a leak above my shower that caused the ceiling to cave in. And so my question is, how do you intend to work with administration to better the conditions within Dobie? And also, we actually have Jay Hartzell on record in a Daily Texan interview talking about how the conditions at Dobie were worse once they got in than they initially thought they were, and they still move students in. So just to reiterate, my question is, how do you intend to work with administration to better the conditions within Dobie, and also to ensure that future acquisitions, for example, Goodall Wooten Hall, meet higher standards prior to students moving in?
Going forward, let's please limit it to 30 seconds. Diego?
Yes, that is a great question. So the first thing is, one big thing that we have is Justice of the Peace, Nick Chu. He represents the entirety of the UT area. We've worked with him before on different issues. He is the person directly in charge of a lot of these tenants' rights issues. If you ever bring up a complaint against your landlord about any sort of thing, it is going to go to his court. We've had multiple discussions over the year about how exactly we can connect students with his team, with his office, and make sure that students have the knowledge, they have a complete, full understanding of how they can formally put complaints not just to UT admin, because in the end, UT admin is not exactly the best landlord, making sure that we connect students with the ability to go to his court. But also, when you talked about future acquisitions, currently, UT owns one of the largest pieces of property, Lions Municipal Golf Course, something that the lease expired in 2020 and the city is currently trying to acquire for housing. Projects like that, UT has to let go of land that are currently not being underutilized and put it towards housing. Thank you.
George?
First of all, I want to say I'm very, very sorry to hear about that. That is completely unacceptable, and that is negligence on the university. That is absolutely, again, unacceptable. And something that I did mention earlier is that we will run into problems with administration, and because we are committed to 100% holding administration accountable. And so in the future, when there's new university housing being built and prior to allowing residents to move in, we're going to ensure that administration holds essentially surveys and audits the place to ensure that they are at living standards. And again, I'm very, very sorry to hear about Dobie. Again, that's completely unacceptable.
Marlena?
Yeah, I would also like to say that sucks. I heard of a similar story at, I believe it's called Noble 2500, where basically the living conditions weren't awful, it just was not built yet. And so students were displaced for many months, and I think some of them still are. And the solution they came up to that was a Band-Aid solution by giving students paychecks, basically, to live elsewhere until the money started running out. So harsh.
Yeah, and the basic idea is if you want to make this, if you want to stop this from being an issue at all, we need to incentivize apartments to really just up their living quality, right? And a really easy way of doing this is by UT kind of stepping its foot down and saying, unless there's a minimum quality requirement met, you know, through whatever metrics we decide to use, for students to live here, students will, you know, be moved elsewhere for some time being and given their sort of money back so that they still have a place to live. And over time, this should eliminate houses from really being low quality because otherwise they won't get rent. They won't be able to be in Austin.
I'm going to do a submitted question next. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, guys. That's on me. Sorry, William, go ahead.
It's okay. I'm so sorry for your experience. That's unacceptable, like everyone else said. And as someone who's lived in those experiences in Riverside, where during finals week last semester, my apartment started flooding from the ceiling, it definitely does suck. But as someone who's also worked in tenant rights in Riverside, I, to an extent, have the knowledge that landlords are scared when tenants know their rights. And one thing we can do is, through our policy initiatives, is creating a tenant rights campaign where people understand what they can do and how they can do it. And we would partner with BOSTA, a nonprofit tenant rights council here, the Austin Tenant Council, and also partner with the project management and construction services here at UT and partner them with the RAs, because if anyone knows their struggles more, is those who live in Dobie, especially the RAs, because they're the ones dealing with the frustrations that students are. So that's what we plan to do.
Thanks, William. Okay, one submitted question really quickly. Something that we've seen from previous executive alliances is surface-level allyship for the LGBTQ+ community and for survivors of interpersonal violence. How do you intend to utilize your roles to advocate for these students in a way that produces tangible results? Anna?
Thank you. So in regards to survivors, something that we have been working on is our reproductive justice policy point, and in this we do aim to address various intersecting topics that lies within reproductive justice. And so one thing that we really want to do is amplify resources for survivors, and as well as in our partnership with the Travis County District Attorney, we want to also amplify legal resources and simply amplify resources outside of the university due to how notorious the Title IX office is in regards to addressing incidents of interpersonal violence. And as far as allyship with the LGBTQIA+ community, we want to also ensure that we are fostering space within the SG community to where, you know, we are sure that everyone feels comfortable and safe within these spaces. And I know that, you know, the MEC, the GSC does amazing work in doing this, and we want to really also support them as well.
William?
I think from the beginning of our campaign, me and Helen have took a clear stance from the conception that we're going to stand with survivors regardless. And you can see our Instagram post where we outline what we plan to do if we were put in administration. And I think the first step to survivor justice is acknowledgement that SG has harmed people and continue to harm people, and that interpersonal violence, at the end of that boils down to an imbalance of power, in the sense that those in administration, the SG administration, have the power to silence survivors and have the privilege of ignorance. And I think we have to set the record straight there. And in the sense of allyship for the LGBT community, I think one thing is that we can further fund the GSC and follow the recommendations of the LGBTQI States of Affairs that was published last year through an effort of Senate, because they have wonderful recommendations on how we can address those problems.
Marlena?
So I'd like to start by saying that this past August, while I was being trained to be an RA, basically we were given the resources to give our girls if something were to happen. But again, the accessibility is just not where it should be. Additionally, I've overheard that there are support groups that you can sign up for, but that the sign-up dates are limited to the beginning of the semester. So if something happens throughout the year, you have to wait. That's unacceptable. Thirdly, we want to expand CMHC resources, right? You shouldn't be limited to 1 to 4 therapy sessions for something that has caused trauma on you for life, okay? I think Harsh wants to expand.
Yeah, and also in terms of allyship with the LGBT community, this really ties into our thing of working with other student orgs and really promoting orgs that have these different identities that support people who identify as something that may not be the cultural norm, right? Because people who do have distinct identities, or maybe even people just struggling to find who they are right now, need these resources and they need to not be isolated in finding them.
Not that they're struggling to find themselves.
Diego?
I think the fact that it took every alliance a while to answer shows how difficult of an issue this is. I think one of the strongest things we can do is support the QTSA. They're the experts on this. All of them are very passionate about this issue, and we should defer to them. It's not for us to speak on them. In regards to interpersonal violence, we want to have zero tolerance policy within student government. Additionally, we want to have more transparency about who's mandatory reporters. The mandatory reporter system, while it may have good intentions, it has disastrous consequences. Another thing, we all know we're all part of different orgs on campus, and we know that we're supposed to have an interpersonal violence training per semester. We all know that that's a joke. We want to polish that to make it better, and we also want to make sure that it's being enforced more strictly within organizations.
Yeah, and a little bit on the Beyond 40 Acres side of things. We know, a lot of us have worked in the state legislature up here, we currently do. We know that our state legislators in Travis County have an incredible ability to fight some of the horrible, harmful bills that are being pushed right now. One of the big ones is there's some, anti-LGBTQ plus bills like the anti-drag bill. Fight those in the state legislature.
I think, unfortunately, we only have time for one more question from the audience.
Oh, wow.
Sorry. I guess if you guys want to stay after and ask them, you can.
Do you want to?
Yeah, but following the official timeline.
Okay.
You're welcome to stay back afterwards, though.
If you are in line by 7 p.m.
Okay. Hello. This is to George and Anna's campaign, but the general essence of the question can be answered by anybody. But how can you commit to survivor justice when there are members from Tejas and Spirits either working in your campaign or supporting it? While these are by far not the only organizations that have committed harm against survivors, I think we can all recognize this. They both are notorious for their recent and public mishandling of interpersonal violence cases. Further, considering your proximity to Greek life, which are spaces that perpetuate rape culture, how do you plan to use positionality to hold yourselves, the members of student government?
Okay, also really quickly, we can extend like 10 minutes if all of y'all are okay with that? Okay, cool. Then we'll take a couple more audience questions after this. If anyone raised their thing, I was not paying attention. Can you limit responses to 30 seconds so we can get through more questions? Yeah. Are y'all okay with that?
Fairly quickly, in terms of members of our campaign team that are involved in the Spirits or Tejas organizations, I'm assuming that you're speaking specifically about Catherine Ospina, who's in Spirits, and she helped co-author our food and security policy platform point. She has been inactive in that organization for about a year, and I have this written down because I knew that this was going to come up. The policy itself that we helped construct and write is anti-poverty. I think that the issue of her attachment to that organization is just trying to take away from the policy as a whole. And I spoke to Catherine personally, and in terms of, she has wanted to drop that organization for about a year now, and she can't per constitution policy because she wants her moment to tap out, is what it's essentially called. I'm not super educated on leaving Spirits.
Yeah, this question was directed at both of y'all, so if y'all have any other closing points, since it was just at y'all's alliance.
No, of course, and again, whenever we were working on the food and security policy platform point, again, that was a conversation that was had with our co-author, and essentially at first, the last thing we wanted to do is co-opt the work of someone who is, again, on the ground, who has co-founded the West Campus Collective, and we also will, if elected, we will have, again, a zero tolerance policy in regards to perpetrators of interpersonal violence, and we will do what we can to, again, always support survivors of interpersonal violence, and we support survivors 110%.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add from the alliances? Okay, our next question then.
Okay, I'll make this as quick as I can. As Vice President of the Senate of College Councils this year, I've had the experience and opportunity of working alongside SG on many important issues and efforts. However, through my role, I've also learned that SG is afforded the luxury of additional resources and funding and overall favoritism from administration in comparison to Senate and the Graduate Student Assembly. Additionally, I know many of you have mentioned Senate-led initiatives like Invest in Texas, but it's important to note historically SG has co-opted initiatives led by leaders within Senate. What are your plans to work alongside the other LSOs, and how do you plan to uplift their voices?
William?
As someone who's been in Senate, I've seen the co-op that SG has done. I think the first thing is collaborating with Senate, right, and making sure that we're a united front, especially because SG, let's be honest, they do have special perks like Samika mentioned. So I think we should use our positionality to, one, protect those LSOs who aren't as funded or as liked and favorable, and make sure their initiatives are first led by them and supported by us.
Anna?
Yeah, I think, Dean of Students has made it perfectly clear that they prioritize student government, which is completely wrong. And, again, I really liked what William said, that in student government, we have been working to increase the collaboration among each other. I did mention Invest in Texas, and we would want to collaborate with Senate as well as GSA, and ensure that our resources are being streamlined equitably and not co-opting any work of anybody.
Diego?
Yes. Brian and I both had the pleasure of being in Senate, so we know the good work that Senate has done. We also believe that part of the reason that SG has become as good as it is now is because of that spirit that Senate has brought into student government and all the reps that came in. Additionally, Brian and I have made an effort to reach out to Senate whenever we had policies because we didn't want to co-op. Me specifically, since I was on academic affairs, I know it's been used historically to co-op Senate's work, and I didn't want to do that when I was in that position of leadership, and I did meet with Senate about that to make sure that we didn't step over any toes.
Harsh?
Yeah, so as someone who's also been in both student government and Senate, I've definitely seen student government sort of overshadow Senate in a lot of ways, and we've actually had this discussion in Senate a couple of times. And really the main thing here is that student government is an amplifier, right? That's something we've said a lot throughout this entire night. And the way to amplify is not through overshadowing, but through promoting, right? We want to make sure that other groups we work with, other groups that are primarily promoted in any of our work that we do, rather than having student government, and we also work with this group, because then we'll overshadow them, right? We need to promote their voices first, and we're just going to be a supporting voice.
All right, next question.
Students were supposed to vote on a non-binding referendum of the Eyes of Texas at the next campus-wide election. Unfortunately, DOS unilaterally used her power to strip the question from the ballot. I know Helen and Brian voted in support of condemning the song, while Marlena threw away her vote to not take a stand on the issue. Where does each of your alliance stand on abolishing the Eyes of Texas?
Anna?
George and I 110% condemn the song. We both are aware and acknowledge the racist history of the Eyes of Texas. And in the event that we are elected, we will put the referendum up for a vote. Again, it's a shame that it was taken down and suspended for the time being, because the students deserve to have their voices heard on this topic. And again, we 110% condemn the Eyes of Texas, and we will ensure that students have their voices heard when it comes to this referendum.
Ryan?
First off, I'll say it is absolutely insane that the Dean of Students went about the way that she did that to do that. It is insane. I was lucky enough to spend a little bit of time working on the Eyes of Texas committee. Diego was on one of the ad hocs before we had a referendum. Our big goal is to make sure if we are elected, we already tried playing nice with the Dean of Students for a long time. It isn't always super effective, and we are willing to take a more aggressive stance. That means going to reporters, means putting a little more external pressure on Dean of Students to make sure we get this done in the 45 days that she said. We want to make sure that happens. We're going to try our best to do that.
Marlena?
Yeah, I want to clarify that the reason I abstained from the vote is because I recognize myself as a mouthpiece to the students. And unfortunately, the referendum was pushed back, but I want to make sure that we have student support on this, okay? I don't want student government to just I want to clarify, I condemn its racist origins. I am a mouthpiece. I want to make sure students are supporting this.
The point is that how can student government as an organization say that it amplifies the voice of students if it decides whatever the hell it wants without actually consulting the students first? There's a referendum going on.
Organizations on campus.
No follow-up questions, please. Yeah, Helen?
As someone who's worked on the committee, it was very disheartening to hear the news, given how much work Adrian and I had put in, as well as the committee, to help educate and hopefully educate people in time for voting on the referendum. And I condemn it, William condemns it. We recognize the dark history that there is behind it, and that's why I led the committee. And something that we hope to do is work with MEC and work with organizations and ensure that we organize so that we are able to, if you want to build off. Sorry.
Yeah. I was like, oh, it was.
Next question.
Yeah, hi. Throughout your term as an executive alliance and immediately after elected, you have to do a lot of recruitment. And through this past executive alliance, we've seen some issues in recruitment, in my opinion, as far as diversifying and reaching outside of the student government and the LSO bubble. A lot of those positions can give other students who are not already in positions of authority a really cool opportunity. So I want to know how you plan to diversify that outreach and recruitment.
Helen?
That's a really good question, and that's something that I also noticed while being a representative within student government, and that was one of the reasons why Representative Tristan and I co-chaired and co-founded the DI caucus. And one of our initiatives included over the summer helping with diversifying recruitment for the executive branch, and something that we did over the summer was reach out to various diverse organizations on campus and communicate to them about and further push the applications so that more people from various backgrounds are able to apply. And that's something that we hope to continue to do if we were to enter administration.
Diego?
Yeah, so we look forward. I know me and Rep. Bailey, we've done a lot of those info sessions together, not just do more of them, but I think there's a lot of things that we can go forward. But as a whole, I think there's just a larger problem as to why people don't want to be in student government. And I think while we definitely want to address that, the main reason is if we can push things on a very much beyond 40 acres things, talk about housing, talk about transportation, and highlight that these things are really, really tangible and that we can get them done. Voter registration, I think students will come on their own and realize that they can make change happen that really does affect students on their day-to-day lives.
Harsh?
Yeah, so one thing I'd like to point out is that there's a lot of small roles in student government agencies, executive board staffings, that most students don't know about, right? And because of that, this is something that usually students inside of student government end up filling up entirely, right? You can have students filling up 2, 3 roles at once, and it completely cuts down on the diversity that is available in the student body. What we want to do is promote these roles and make sure that students from the student body working in different places can put their voice in student government, can work in these agencies and these staffs in order to ensure that their voice is heard in student government and on campus.
Anna?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up that question because I know that that was definitely something that was discussed a lot when we started the recruitment process for this, for the fall, which was diversifying the way in which we do recruitment and also making it far more equitable. And so something that we would like to do is engage in intentional outreach and reach out to students that are not, that are usually disengaged from student government, that student government has not taken into account historically, and ensure that these positions are, readily available to everyone.
Great, thanks. And I think we have time for one more question because we have to have the closing statements from everyone.
So as the Speaker pro tempore of Assembly and as a colored representative, I was appalled to hear that some of you view the legislative branch of Assembly as a purely performative body, George. So I would like to ask all of you how you plan to work with the legislative branch and work with your fellow elected people that represent students instead of seeing them as a purely performative useless entity, seeing as they are the ones who have to approve all of your appointments to all the university-wide committees which do such amazing work.
So the comment that was made during the opening statement was in regard to, throughout this entire campaign cycle, we've had conversations with students outside of student government. And that is the largely held belief amongst most students outside of student government, that student government, specifically the legislative branch of student government, is performative because the bills that are passed in terms of the legislation do nothing to affect the day-to-day of these everyday students. I in no way meant to say that the legislative branch as a whole is performative. We obviously are going to have to work with the branch in the event that we are elected, and we plan to facilitate open communication, and we'll always be willing to have the conversations and to reach common ground to reach some sort of semblance of commonality so that we can actually affect day-to-day change.
I think since that was directed at just one alliance, I think we can take one more question from the person who was next in line. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you.
This is a general question. As someone who's lived in Riverside for 3 years, we have long been ignored by the UT administration and excluded from conversations about the student body. Brian, you have talked about not co-opting organizers, yet after our first meeting, you ghosted our coalition, Rise Riverside, yet continue to post about Riverside on your Instagram. How do you all plan on improving our connection to campus and expanding or improving transportation access to campus?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I think there was a meeting that we had during the summer where essentially our meeting was essentially to talk about how exactly we can give Riverside more representation in student government. It was something that me and another rep did. We thought, we were new, and we thought that our best way to do this was to come forward and try to create some sort of representative seats based on geographical region. I try to put forward some stuff. Obviously, if that came off wrong, I apologize. If you all felt I was co-opting, that was sincerely not my intention. I hope that throughout this time, throughout our campaign, we've highlighted that we do feel like we have genuine solutions to these problems, but ultimately I do apologize for that.
If no other executive alliance has any, okay. Anna?
Of course, the issues with transportation and the university often overlooking students that reside in Riverside is wrong, and it's an issue of accessibility, and something that we want to do is ensure that every student's needs are amplified within the organization, that we are working with people that are already doing the work and ensuring that we are hearing everyone out to really enact tangible change.
William?
That's a really good question, especially because I am one of the organizers that got ghosted during that meeting. And it really sucked that a thing that we really cared about never got followed up on, because those students need change, and all of the solutions that we were presented were Band-Aid solutions. But when the administration, when we also talked to administration, they told us to get ride shares like Lyft and Uber to campus. And it just sucks that administration keeps pushing us aside like that, but that's why I'm here, to make sure that Riverside's heard and present.
Okay. Marlena?
Yeah, absolutely. So to my knowledge, I think the some sort of transportation was just expanded to Riverside. But an idea that Harsh and I actually had was UT just implemented HEB drop-offs for locations on campus. I think a great addition would be adding a 5th location in Riverside to increase the accessibility and reduce food insecurity.
I know it wasn't by name, but Brian, I'm going to give you the chance to have a rebuttal anyways, because I think that was pretty clearly directed at you.
All right, I appreciate that. So yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the things that we do have plans. If you go check out our Instagram right now, we have a lot of stuff when it comes to transportation. The biggest thing is right now, the city of Austin is about to invest an incredible amount of money into Project Connect, which is essentially a multi-million-dollar investment into public transit, like our bus lines, and especially a light rail. Our big thing is when we worked with Zoe, I worked for Zoe in his past election. We've already talked to Councilman Vela, Councilman Velasquez, and Councilman Kadri, and they have all made very, very strong commitments to wanting to make sure that UT and surrounding UT areas are at the center of this transportation policy. So that's just one of the several means that we hope to advocate in the City Council to help places like Riverside and all of student areas.
Unfortunately, he didn't say anything that applause for a rebuttal, but thank you guys. Thank you to everyone who participated and asked or submitted questions. Now each executive alliance will have 2 minutes to provide a closing statement. And we're going to start from Helen and William and go to Diego and Brian.
When we imagine and conceptualize tomorrow's Texas, a lot of this was done with intention and care. I think when I see tomorrow's Texas, I see the people like Helen and I see my friends, I see my community, I see Riverside. I see a movement that's student-led and community-built. I see a movement that reimagines UT for the better, and that puts voices who have lived experiences in positions of power, and that puts those puts those in positions and also protects them.
This is something that we hope to have implemented throughout our policy platforms, and it's something that we have really thought through with intention and care to ensure that we are doing our best to be as authentic as possible and be authentic to the student body in the way we approach their various concerns that they address to us.
I think it's important that we.
Thanks, guys. Harsh, Marlena?
Right. So, opportunity. That's what our entire campaign is based on, right? Marlena and I truly believe that anyone, regardless of their background or identity, deserves a chance to build something for themselves, right? The chance to make UT financially feasible, the chance to make their voice heard on campus. That's what we're fighting for. Again, that's why we're working to establish a U-wide co-op program. And again, this is really to give students the ability to earn enough to actually afford their education, while building skills they need to succeed after it. This is something that so many companies have already expressed interest in, and something that really uses our position, a prime university in the heart of Austin, to its fullest. And again, this is not just a nice sounding idea, but something that can, and in many places already has been implemented. This is tomorrow's reality. And it doesn't just stop there, because students also deserve the chance to be heard on campus, to make their voices known in spaces like student government, and to really push for their wants and their needs. That's why we're working alongside smaller organizations so we can push for actual change on campus, so that we're working with students rather than above them, because student government is not the place for just a few to decide what's best for 50,000 students. It's the place for us to really listen to them and to amplify their voices. It is a place for us to advocate on their behalf. Because at the end of the day, student government is a mouthpiece, right? It's an organization that is ran for the students, by the students. That is our role and that is our duty. And it's a duty that Marlena and I take very seriously. So let's change campus for the better together. Opportunity is for everyone.
Awesome. George, Anna?
So when Anna and I chose to do this, we really wanted to put an intentional foot forward. And when I say that, I mean we formulated policy that was very feasible, very possible, something that could be done in the span of a year. And the thing that was always at the center of our mind was the general student body, because at the end of the day, yes, we'll be working in student government and in the institution that is student government, but we are representing the entire university, and we need to be aware of that fact when we make decisions and when we work on behalf of them.
Yeah, so again, my name is Ana Fuentes, and I'm running alongside George, and that was one of the centers of our campaign, is bringing everyone into the conversation and ensuring that we are working with leaders in the space and not co-opting anybody's work. And that's why a lot of our policy is co-authored with a lot of really extraordinary individuals on this campus who have done amazing work in regards to a lot of different issues that that students are facing on a day-to-day basis. And essentially what we want to do is ensure that student government is something to believe in. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And then Diego, Brian?
We're running because we have proven progressive leadership. We have shown results. We know how the legislative branch works. We know how student government operates. And we want to use that institutional knowledge that we have to let other people that may not have that knowledge and amplify their voices. We don't use divisive language. We coalition build. We don't try to antagonize the people that we work with. And most of all, while we do it, we're transparent and we're accountable. As you saw, we were held accountable, and we think that's a beautiful part of government. And we hope that we can use those past experiences to fuel the future for a more progressive UT.
And something that we have seen throughout our time over the last year campaigning everything is that for a vast majority of students, they just simply feel left behind. Every single year, we feel our rent prices rising. We see the cost of living in general go higher and higher. We find it harder and harder to live in this city without a car. And for the most part, we just feel completely separated from the city of Austin. UT is a very, very special part of this city. And our biggest thing is, yes, well, we have so many things that we are trying to get done here directly on this campus. We think we have the opportunity to do so much more. Really, for the first time, utilize a very progressive city council to get some housing done, to get affordable housing, get a very progressive city council to get some really great transportation plans taken care of, work with our commissioners court to get polling locations for the first time, ample amount of polling locations on campus, and a lot of issues just like these, because in the end, yes, student government, it is, has a lot of work to do, but I think our biggest downfall is that we are not utilizing these outside resources. And we do have the opportunity to be the mouthpiece of students at every level of government, local, county, and the state. So overall, I just hope you all take a chance to look at our policy. Hopefully you all get an idea that we really have put a lot of thought into it, and we really do care about this and everything we've done. We encourage you all to reach out to us after. We'll be hanging around to answer more questions. So thank you all so much.
Thank you to all of our Executive Alliance and university-wide representative candidates who participated, and we appreciate the chance to get a better understanding of your policies and platforms. Thank you as well to everyone who attended or watched via our live stream, and keep an eye out on Friday for the Texans endorsement of an Executive Alliance. Voting for students opens Monday, February 27th and ends Tuesday, February 28th at 5 p.m. Election results will be announced on March 6th at 3 p.m. Best of luck to our candidates in their races.